Saturday, 14th May 1977, South Armagh. The 3 Steps Inn sits near the village of Dromintee, a couple of hundred yards from the border with County Louth. Just before 10 in the evening, a man walks into the bar. He tells the regulars his name is Danny McErlaine, a motor mechanic from Ardoyne in Belfast, a member of the official IRA. He's in civilian clothes. He buys drinks. He chats. At some point, he gets up and sings with the band. Rebel songs, most consistently reported as the Broad Black Brimmer. Just before midnight, he walks out to the car park. He's challenged to a fight by one of the drinkers, a man named Terry McCormick, who later said he heard a metallic sound when the stranger was punched and fell. Believing the man was carrying a gun, McCormick called out to his companions. What followed was a ferocious struggle. Nairac was disarmed of his Browning pistol, overpowered, and bundled into a car. Within minutes, he was across the border. By the early hours, he had been beaten, interrogated through the night, and shot dead near Ravensdale, at a place called Flurry Bridge in County Louth. The man wasn't Danny McErlaine. He was Captain Robert Nairac of the Grenadier Guards, Army number 493007. Base records tracked his final evening precisely. Nairac signed out of Bessbrook Mill at 9:25 p.m, alone, in plain clothes, due back by 11:30. The operations officer, Captain David Collett, later gave a statement to the RUC, logging 4 radio transmissions from the drive at 9:48, 9:52, 9:56 and 9:58 p.m, when Nairac said he would be closing communications and confirmed he had reached the 3 Steps Inn. He missed every agreed radio check after that. Whether that sighting was connected to what followed isn't established. According to later accounts, a party of British soldiers was positioned not more than 100 yards from the pub that night. Nairac never made contact with them through the radio hidden on his person. His disappearance triggered a large-scale search across Ireland, led in the north by Major H. Jones, Brigade Major at HQ 3rd Infantry Brigade. After 4 days, the Garda Síochána confirmed to the RUC that they had reliable evidence of the killing. On the 17th May, the New York Times reported an IRA telex stating that a British Army captain had been taken outside a pub named the 3 Steps and executed after interrogation. In November 1977, Liam Townsend, a 24-year-old IRA member from the village of May, was convicted of the murder in Dublin's Special Criminal Court. His confession began, "I shot the British captain. He never told us anything. He was a great soldier." He served 13 years. In 1978, the RUC arrested 5 more men from the South Armagh area. 2 were convicted of murder, 1 of manslaughter, 1 of kidnapping, 1 of withholding information. In 2011, Kevin Crilly, an IRA veteran who had spent years on the run in the United States, was cleared of all charges connected to the abduction, a judge ruling that the prosecution had failed to prove intention or prior knowledge. Robert Nairac was 28 years old. His body has never been recovered. He is one of 17 people known as the Disappeared. The first official search for his remains on private farmland near the hill of Fowhart in County Louth in the autumn of 2024 came up empty. Later retellings add details to that night. A pint of Guinness, a game of pool. Neither appears in the contemporary record. The pool game shows up in one documentary reconstruction. The Guinness detail is repeated across narratives, but no eyewitness account or official report supports it. That distinction matters because everything that follows is a sorting exercise. Confirmed, claimed, disputed, and the sorting starts here. The cover identity is confirmed. The false name, the civilian clothes, the lone drive into a Republican pub, all documented. What those facts establish is that Nairac was operating undercover in a hostile environment. What they don't establish is that he was a member of 14 intelligence company. That is the central question. The Det, pronounced as in detachment, was the Army's covert surveillance unit in Northern Ireland, officially known as 14 Intelligence Company, 14 INT for short. For decades, its existence went unacknowledged, and whether Robert Nairac was formally one of its members remains one of the most argued about questions in the comment sections beneath any documentary on the Troubles. On that question, the public argument is split down the middle. The same two claims surface again and again. People who know he was Det. Nairac wasn't in the Det. Stop lying. Those exact lines come from a collected sample of public discussion. Neither can be traced to a verified source. But they capture the shape of the argument, and the argument has been running for nearly 50 years. The honest way to test it's an evidence ladder with 3 rungs: confirmed, claimed, disputed. This is an audit, not a biography, not an exposé. It sorts what can be proved from what can't, and it refuses to force a verdict the evidence can't support. Start with the man, because his background explains how he ended up in that pub. Robert Lawrence Nairac was born on the 31st of August 1948 in Mauritius, then a British Crown colony. His mother English, his father a French Mauritian eye surgeon. The family moved to England when he was a year old, settling in Sunderland. He was educated at Ampleforth, the Catholic public school, then read medieval and military history at Lincoln College, Oxford, where he won 4 boxing blues and kept a falcon in his rooms, a bird that appeared in the 1969 film Kes. At Oxford, he became friends with the sons of Lord Killannin and spent holidays with the family in Dublin and in Connemara, an early immersion in Irish life that would later serve him in uniform. After Oxford, he entered the Royal Military Academy Sandhurst, commissioned into the Grenadier Guards, and undertook postgraduate study in Dublin before joining his regiment. His first Northern Ireland tour came in 1973 with the 2nd Battalion Grenadier Guards in Belfast, first the Shankill Road, then the Ardoyne. The tour was judged a success: 58 weapons, 9,000 rounds of ammunition and 693 pounds of explosives taken, 104 men jailed, no casualties inflicted or suffered. Nairac worked with teenagers at the Ardoyne Sports Club and stayed on as liaison officer for the replacement battalion, the Argyll and Sutherland Highlanders. Shortly after, he narrowly avoided the blast of a car bomb on the Crumlin Road. When his battalion transferred to Hong Kong, he chose not to go. He volunteered for military intelligence duties in Northern Ireland, completed several training courses, including, by one detailed account, work with the SAS in Hereford, and in the spring of 1974 passed selection for the newly formed Special Reconnaissance Unit. That unit is the Det. Its official name was 14 Intelligence Company. In Army shorthand, 14 INT. To the soldiers who served in it and the communities it watched, it was simply the Det, short for detachment. It grew out of a 1972 decision to create a professional covert surveillance capability, after earlier ad hoc plainclothes operations were exposed and compromised. The prime task of the Special Reconnaissance Unit, according to a document later unearthed at the National Archives, was to conduct covert surveillance of terrorists as a preliminary to an arrest carried out by security forces in uniform. The same document notes the unit could also be used to contact and handle agents or informers. Candidates had to pass a rigorous selection process designed to weed out anyone without the right temperament. Nairac passed and deployed to Northern Ireland on the 21st of May, 1974. Wikipedia's account of his service records the posting with unusual specificity. He returned to the province attached to 4 Field Survey Troop Royal Engineers, one of the 3 subunits of a special duties unit known as 14 Intelligence Company, 14 INT. That single sentence contains the entire dispute. Attached, one of 3 subunits, a unit known as 14 INT. During this period, Nairac acquired the nickname Danny Boy and was spotted on at least one occasion in plain clothes at a cattle market in Newry. He finished the tour in mid-1975, returned to his regiment and was promoted to captain on the 4th of September 1975. He came back for a 4th tour as a liaison officer based at Bessbrook Mill, the posting that would end at the 3 Steps Inn. What he was doing at the pub that night remains contested. The operations log shows he had permission to be there. Some accounts say he went to meet an informer. An RUC Special Branch officer later claimed he had gone to the 4 Steps to meet a girl with a close relative in the IRA. Both are unverified. His George Cross citation says only that his task that night was connected with surveillance operations. Now the paperwork, because that's where the contradiction first appears. The public record on Robert Nairac names one unit, the Grenadier Guards. His George Cross citation, gazetted in the London Gazette on the 13th of February 1979, describes him as Captain Robert Lawrence Nairac, 493007, Grenadier Guards. It records 4 tours, totalling 28 months. Notes that on his 4th tour he was a liaison officer at Headquarters 3 Infantry Brigade, and states that his task was connected with surveillance operations. That is the entire official description. The citation does not mention 14 Intelligence Company. It does not mention 4 Field Survey Troop Royal Engineers. The investigative record does. A range of sources, investigative databases, a parliamentary exchange, testimony from former intelligence officers, places Nairac inside the Special Reconnaissance Unit through a specific posting. 4 Field Survey Troop, Royal Engineers. So which is it? A genuine Royal Engineers surveying unit or a cover? Parliamentary answers from 1989 confirm that on paper, 4 Field Survey Troop was exactly what it sounded like. A Royal Engineers survey troop stationed at Castle Dillon, County Armagh, in 1974-75. The Ministry of Defence described a field survey unit's role as providing or processing aerial photographs, ground surveys and mapping for the Army. A boring, plausible, entirely innocuous job. Investigative sources say that was precisely the point. The investigative database Powerbase describes 4 Field Survey Troop as a cover name for a British military undercover unit in Northern Ireland responsible for running agents inside paramilitary organisations, operating between 1973 and 1975 as a subsidiary of 14 Intelligence Company, with SAS personnel on staff. The same unit also ran under another cover designation, the Northern Ireland Training and Tactics Team, or NITAT. Fred Holroyd, a former British Army intelligence officer, took the claim further. In a 1989 parliamentary exchange, he said the SAS used 4 Field Survey Troop, Royal Engineers, as a cover name for operations run from Castle Dillon in the mid-1970s, with personnel reportedly told the unit was NITAT. And Holroyd named Nairac explicitly as one of its officers, in his words, seconded to 14th Intelligence. So the paper trail runs in 2 directions at once. One document says Grenadier Guards, Liaison Officer. Another set of accounts says the real posting was a cover-titled subunit of the det. The public record does not settle which is administratively true. What it demonstrates is layering. Cover designations stacked on top of cover designations. Exactly what a covert intelligence unit looks like from the outside. This is where precision matters, because every published source that addresses the question uses slightly different words, and the differences are the story. Mark Urban's Undercover War. Captain Robert Nairac, an MLO attached to 14 Intelligence Company. Attached. The historian Christopher Harvey, writing in Northern Ireland The Troubles, British Army officer Robert Nairac of the det. Anne Cadwallader's lethal allies. Robert Nairac, British Army captain, member of 4 Field Survey Troop, an undercover surveillance unit of the Special Reconnaissance Unit. Member. Hot Press, writing in 2008. He was attached to what subsequently became known as 14th Intelligence and Security Company, or 14 INT. Robert Nairac wasn't a fully fledged member of the company. His role was as a liaison officer. Attached, and explicitly not fully fledged. The Cain Conflict Archive, the main academic database for the Troubles, goes further. It describes Nairac as a military liaison officer attached to 14 Intelligence Company, adding that his sole mandate was to brief soldiers on information received and collated from MI5 and RUC Special Branch. The Special Forces Roll of Honour lists his unit as 14th Intelligence Company, 4th Field Survey Troop, and then, in the same entry, adds officially Liaison Officer, HQ 3rd Infantry Brigade. 1 entry, 2 designations, held simultaneously. That is the whole problem in miniature. The Belfast Crown Court, ruling in 2011 on the prosecution of Kevin Crilly, described Nairac as a staff officer attached to staff headquarters serving in the South Armagh area of Northern Ireland, based at Bessbrook Mill Army Camp. The court's language is careful, bureaucratic, and conspicuously avoids naming a unit. Even the power base profile, the source most inclined to place Nairac inside the det, describes his official job as liaison between Bessbrook Base and the covert groups operating in the area, including the SAS and RUC Special Branch. The same profile calls him a founder member of a related covert intelligence unit known as the det. That claim appears nowhere else in the available record. Single source, uncorroborated. One myth attached to the night deserves the same treatment. Popular retellings have Nairac singing Danny Boy in the pub. Witnesses report the Broad Black Brimmer, a rebel ballad about the 1916 Rising. The confusion probably grows out of the nickname his comrades used. Danny Boy, borrowed from the Irish persona he adopted. The myth and the man blurred early, and they have stayed blurred. Now the framework that makes sense of the contradiction. Part of the problem is that in the det could mean 4 different things in 1970s Army administration. You could be formally posted to 14 Intelligence Company as a core surveillance operator. You could be posted to a cover-titled unit, like 4 Field Survey Troop, that in practice formed part of the det's structure. You could be seconded or attached from a parent regiment, with your paperwork showing that regiment rather than the covert unit. Or you could be cooperating as a liaison officer, working inside the det's operational world, coordinating between the unit, the SAS, the local brigade and special branch, without ever being carried on the det's strength. Apply that grid to the source record. Urban's attached fits the secondment category. Cadwallader's member of 4 Field Survey Troop fits the cover-titled posting. Hot Press's not a fully fledged member fits the liaison category. The Roll of Honour's officially liaison officer fits the same. The sources aren't necessarily contradicting each other. They may be describing different layers of a single arrangement. a Grenadier Guards captain seconded into the covert world, operationally working with the Det and the SAS carried on his regiment's books. That is why the comment section argument gets so heated. When someone says he was in the Det, they may mean he worked inside its operational ecosystem undercover, which the evidence supports. When someone says he wasn't in the Det, they may mean he was never a badged operator on the formal unit role, which the evidence also supports. The same underlying situation, described two different ways, both sincerely held. No declassified army document in public circulation lists 14 Intelligence Company as Nairac's unit of record. The official record never uses the term at all. The strongest claimed evidence in the other direction is more personal. In the comment sample, one individual said their father worked with Nairac at Bessbrook Mill. That comment received 45 likes. 45 likes is real engagement. It isn't verification. The commenter is anonymous, the claim is uncorroborated, and no documentation has been produced to support it. In the same sample, a broader cluster of comments claiming personal or family connections to Nairac or to people who knew him generated 199 engagement points across 10 comments. None is independently verified. The Bessbrook detail carries weight because it points at a real place. That Nairac was based at Bessbrook Mill during his final tour is confirmed by multiple independent sources, including a Northern Ireland judicial ruling. The mill itself was built in 1845 for linen production, requisitioned around 1970 and converted by 1972 into a fortified forward operating base. At its peak, it was described as the busiest SAS helipad in Europe, running roughly 600 helicopter flights a week, and it hosted the SAS, 14 Intelligence Company's South Detachment, and other units. One history of the period puts it plainly: the Southern Detachment ran out of Bessbrook, which is exactly the problem for the family testimony. Even if the father in that comment really did work alongside Nairac at the mill, and the claim is strictly unverified, working at Bessbrook does not prove Det membership. The base housed multiple covert units. Being in the building isn't the same as being on the unit's strength. The neighbouring question, whether Nairac was in the SAS, shows what a resolved membership question looks like. The IRA claimed at the time that Nairac confessed to being part of an SAS unit. The British Army denied it. His name does not appear on the SAS memorial wall at Hereford. His biographer, John Parker, wrote that Nairac was never in the SAS. A Northern Ireland office telegram described his role as coordination of intelligence information and noted he was not an SAS member. Jeff Knupfer, the former lead investigator of the Independent Commission for the Location of Victims' Remains, dismissed allegations of SAS membership as completely untrue. Even Ken Connor, the former SAS man involved in creating 14 INT, wrote that had Nairac been an SAS member, he wouldn't have been allowed to operate in the way he did. Every direction points the same way. The SAS question is settled because the record is deep enough to settle it. The Det question isn't settled, not because the evidence points the other way, but because the record is shallow. The unit's very existence went officially unacknowledged for decades. Its personnel records were never made public, and Nairac's own paperwork was written in a language of cover designations designed to be difficult to decode. The public argument itself has a measurable shape, and it's worth stating the limits of that measurement plainly. A collected sample of 50 comments on the Nairac question represents 1,172 of 1,603 engagement points. The raw totals don't even agree with themselves. One pass through the material counts 346 comments, another counts 430. Nobody has reconciled the difference. When the underlying data is that imperfect, conclusions drawn from it have to stay provisional. Within the sample, the numbers line up like this. The Broad faction, arguing Nairac was connected to the debt, accounts for an estimated 41% of engagement. The critics, arguing he wasn't in the debt, account for 18.7%. And the largest single category by engagement is neither side. People adding law, correcting other commenters' facts, and arguing over details. That category, law additions and corrections, generated 311 engagement points across 16 comments, bigger than both factions taken individually. The law category is worth pausing on. These are commenters who aren't trying to win the membership argument. They're trying to get the record straight on the things around it. The song he sang, the spelling of the alias, whether the pub was the 3 steps or the 4 steps. That kind of correction work is the dominant activity in the sample, a sign that the audience cares more about accuracy than about taking sides. Those numbers can't tell us whether Nairac was in the debt. They measure audience behaviour, not archival truth. What they show is a dispute that is real, sustained, and genuinely divided, and a community that treats the details as if they matter, because they do. The evidence sorts onto 3 rungs. Confirmed. Nairac operated under a false identity in an active covert setting. He was a Grenadier Guards captain and liaison officer based at Bessbrook Mill. On the night of 14th May 1977, he sang Republican songs in the 3 Steps Inn, was abducted from its car park, and was killed. Multiple credible sources describe him as attached to, seconded to, or working with 14 Intelligence Company. The exact words vary, and the variation is meaningful. 4. Field Survey Troop existed as a genuine Royal Engineers unit and was also used as a cover designation linked to the debt. Claimed. The Bessbrook Mill family connection, with its 45 likes, and the wider cluster of personal testimony, 199 engagement points across 10 comments, none independently verified. The 2 polarizing quotes, "People who know he was debt," and "Nairac wasn't in the debt, stop lying," are features of the argument, not evidence within it. Not currently provable. That Nairac was formally carried on 14 intelligence companies' administrative strength. No declassified primary document in public circulation lists 14 Intelligence Company as his unit of record. That doesn't mean it isn't true. Covert units don't publish rosters. It means the question is open and the available evidence isn't enough to close it. Secrecy can explain contradictory labels. It can't resolve them. If you have relevant knowledge, first-hand, family, or second-hand, the useful thing to offer is which of those it's, and whether any documentation supports it. A first-hand account and a family story carry different weight. Both are worth hearing. Both would move this argument from the comment section into the record. Robert Nairac walked into the 3 Steps Inn as Danny McErlaine on a spring night in 1977. He never walked out. What he was doing there, and whose books he was on, is still waiting on evidence that may not exist.